what really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, where you'll find out what the Fukushima's going on.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Tuesday, November 20th, 2018, getting into the week here, 2 days away from Thanksgiving. And I imagine probably a lot of people are out there already traveling and to go visit with family and everything. And the rest of us are going to stay home on Thursday and use FaceTime and Skype and connect with the family that way. And already we're getting a warning as you get ready to make your Thanksgiving dinner. The CDC is saying to avoid romaine lettuce. Apparently there's been a major E. coli outbreak literally all across the country. They don't know where it originated, so stick with the iceberg lettuce for your salads here. Anyway, we've got a lot to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room ready to answer the phone. Put you on the air with your comments, questions, and opinions. Now, down in Florida, the recount is over, but already people are saying, what's going to happen when 2020 gets here? Are we going to see a repeat? Well, given that nothing was done to fix the system following 2000, Bush and Gore, I would say, yeah, unless some major changes are made, we're going to see a repeat. And that one judge who was involved in some of the litigiousness that was attendant on this recount mess was absolutely correct. We're a laughingstock to the rest of the world for the way our elections are being run. So a lot of people are justified in saying we can't let this happen again, and you shouldn't let it happen again. Now, the U.S. Department of Justice has declined to look into the altered election documents that were found in Florida, but the state office, the Florida Department of Law Enforcement and Office of Statewide Prosecution, have opened a criminal investigation into the allegations. Now, evidence reported to the Department of State suggests a possible effort by Democrats to have voters fix their ballots after the state's deadline in at least 4 counties. Now, as you know, Brenda Snipes has now resigned. She's got a very healthy pension from all of her years in government service. But you look back at this lady's career and you ask, how was it she kept her job? On election night, she reported 634,000 votes were cast. And then later on in the week said that there was actually 717,000. So that means that Broward County Democrats found 83,000 votes in just 2 days. Snipes never explained how that happened. But over the years, Brenda Snipes has been accused of illegally destroying ballots, not mailing out absentee ballots, systemic breakdowns making it difficult for Floridians to cast votes, posting election results before the polls closed, sued for leaving amendments off the ballots, did not notify voters their absentee ballots expired, having staffers campaign while on the clock, problems publishing the ballots, ballot stuffing, voters receiving defective ballots, piles of ballots cropped up way after Election Day, opening ballots in privates. Back in 2016, just days before the November election, Republicans sued Brenda Snipes for illegally opening thousands of mail-in ballots before the election without supervision. And in July of 2017, Snipes admitted in court non-citizens were voting in Broward County. How did this person keep her job for all that long? Now, out in California, there's another investigation that's been launched up. There have been arrests and indictments. Apparently, prosecutors are saying there was a vote fraud scheme in which the Skid Row homeless population were offered money and cigarettes in exchange for fake and forged signatures on ballot petitions and registration documents. And apparently 9 people have been charged with felony counts related to the offenses. And apparently the defendants were engaged in the solicitation of hundreds of false and forged signatures on state ballot petitions offering homeless people $1 or cigarettes for their participation. Now, unfortunately, the original Fox News article does not say if these are Republicans or Democrats. And I think that's a stunning oversight. I think we need to know who's doing this. And of course, over at CNN, their political analyst Kirsten Powers is still catching static for her comment the other day that white women who voted for Trump are racists. You know, it's just impossible that they didn't like Hillary Clinton, so obviously they had to be racist. Except that, wait a minute, I think Hillary Clinton is white. So I don't know where Kirsten Powers got this, that white women who voted for Trump are racists. Hillary's white. Okay. Apparently, again, the courts are standing up against the president, and I think it's getting inappropriate. Apparently, Judge Timothy J. Kelly issued a temporary restraining order in the lawsuit filed by CNN against the president and his staff for revoking the White House press pass of Jim Acosta, supposedly for improperly touching a White House female intern. And CNN is being supported, amazingly enough, by Fox News, which is clearly shifting to the left under the new management of the Murdoch sons, both of whom are dyed-in-the-wool liberals. So apparently this Trump-appointed judge is ordering Trump to give Acosta back his press pass until the lawsuit is decided. We're going to do a shout-out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. And boy, it was a bad day on the stock markets. More about that later in the show here. Now, as you know, it has been leaked, or let slip, or deliberately leaked, rather, that the United States does have some kind of sealed charge against Julian Assange. They want to bring him back to the United States and prosecute him under the Espionage Act. This is going to be very, very tricky, because it's going to be very hard to justify the prosecution of Julian Assange at the same time you're saying there's no need to prosecute Hillary Clinton. Former FBI Director James Comey got up on TV and went down an entire laundry list of Title 18 felony violations committed by Hillary Clinton. And then he said, we're not recommending charges because she didn't mean to do wrong, even though Title 18 does not require intent, as Trey Gowdy kept trying to remind him. So you have Hillary with all of her Title 18 violations, and you're going to bring Julian Assange back and prosecute him for leaking that, I assume this is about that chain gun video. It's going to be a hard sell that it's okay to let Hillary Clinton skate on espionage charges, but not Julian Assange. So, anyway. The Democratic Party, even though they are victorious in the House of Representatives, the infighting is definitely cranking up. And apparently there's a great deal of contention regarding Nancy Pelosi's desire to return to being Speaker of the House. And apparently more and more Democrats are coming forward to say absolutely no. They want a real change in Washington. And they're saying not only is that what they want, that's what the Democratic voters want. They want real change. They don't want to return to the status quo of the Democratic Party as it has been up until now. So apparently there is a letter that's circulating around saying that there needs to be change. The letter is signed by 12 incumbents, 3 incoming freshmen, 1 candidate, Ben McAdams of Utah, whose race has not yet been called. There's still a couple of races out there that are still too close to call here. So basically, you've got Nancy Pelosi of California, Steny Hoyer of Maryland, have led the House Democrats for 16 years. And for 12 years, they've been joined in the leadership triumvirate by Jim Clyburn of South Carolina. And by 2020's election, all 3 House leaders will be over 80 years of age. So the new incoming Democrats are saying this gerontocracy has gone on long enough, and it is time for some new blood, and I would agree. Now, Judicial Watch has come on out. They're looking at the possibility that Maxine Waters will now chair the House Financial Services Committee, and Judicial Watch is saying, no, when you consider her record and her long history of poor ethical and moral fitness, it's simply outrageous that Maxine Waters would be considered for the chair of the ultra-powerful House Financial Services Committee, which is jurisdiction over the country's banking system, economy, housing, and insurance. And as Judicial Watch is putting on out, Waters has been embroiled in numerous controversies. In fact, just a new one broke the other day, where there was a little bit of a pay-for-play deal going on during the campaign. Apparently, one of the big corrupt acts is the federal legislator was steering millions of federal bailout dollars to her husband's failing bank, One United. Waters allocated $12 million to the Massachusetts bank in which she and her board member husband held shares. One United subsequently got shut down by the government, and American taxpayers got stiffed for the millions of dollars. So, yeah, just another typical member of Congress here. I think the Democrats are starting to realize they've got a real wild card, or wildcat, if you will, with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Apparently, she is launching a plot to overthrow incumbent Democrats. This is being reported at the Gateway Pundit. And Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez basically was part of a conference call for the newly formed Justice Democrats. And this is a radical far-left group that's calling on supporters to start planning their campaigns against the current incumbent Democrats who they feel are not socialist enough. Now, that might actually help Trump in 2020. Apparently, Ocasio-Cortez is now out there complaining about the number of men in the Democratic Party and how there's too few people of color. So Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is basically declaring war on white Democrats. If you're a white Democrat, boy, you've got to go. I think Hillary Clinton's a white Democrat. For that matter, so is Bill Clinton here. But it's basically taking identity politics to a ridiculous extreme. And not that I'm a friend of the Democratic Party or anything, but Alexandria here is going to cause them a lot of harm here. So the Dementorcrats are definitely dealing with some internal structural issues, as it were. We keep hearing that polls are showing the leading contenders for Democratic nominee for 2020 are Bernie Sanders, and apparently another one is Robert Francis Beto O'Rourke. And they're waiting for O'Rourke to actually make a decision, to formally decide if he's going to run for president in 2020. And apparently a lot of Democratic political donors are holding off supporting any other candidates until this decision comes on down. But what's really interesting is that Hillary is just not showing up on any of these polls. I think the Hillary fatigue has set in. The other day we were talking about how Hillary and Bill's conversation tour, book tour, where they were charging $700 a ticket for the front row seats. Nobody's showing up. Nobody's buying the tickets. And the word is they may just cancel the rest of it. And that was supposed to be Hillary getting a feel for public support for her run in 2020. And I guess she got the message. So that will be good. All right. Now, story coming on out of Zero Hedge talking about Gender World. And basically this article is talking about how with the defeat of Hillary and certain other political setbacks, feminists are going back to a policy they had in the 1990s. No matter what happens, it's the fault of men. It's the evil patriarchy. All the sorrows of our life are basically the fault of the wicked white male patriarchy that must be defeated in order to usher in a wonderful world of female sharing and caring. Which, by the way, did not happen back in the 1990s. As more and more women went into the corporate world, they proved to be utterly ruthless, especially to other women. But they're going on back to that. Men are being scapegoated. We saw it in the 1990s. We're seeing it again. You evil white males. I'm not evil. Okay, now with Whitaker serving as acting Attorney General, despite efforts by the Democrats to pry him out of there and replace him with Rod Rosenstein, there is now a concern that there may actually finally be a real investigation into Hillary Clinton's use of the email server. So to try and offset that, Trump's detractors, Hillary's defenders, are basically recycling a story that came out in Newsweek about 14 months ago, where Newsweek was out there saying that Ivanka Trump was using a private email account. Ooh, horror of horrors. And they're basically trying to say, see, everybody does it. There's no need to investigate Hillary Clinton. Forgetting, of course, that Ivanka's private emails were sent from her personal account before she was appointed advisor to the president. And there are some serious distinctions regarding the two cases here. All right. First and foremost, of course, is the fact that Hillary had her own private server in her home. Ivanka didn't. She just used a private email account. Hillary Clinton was handling classified information. Ivanka was not. And Hillary Clinton, of course, deleted at least 33,000 emails that we know of. Ivanka Trump, in her capacity as advisor to the White House, has apparently complied with all of the federal records laws. And again, Hillary Clinton had classified information. Ivanka did not. The two cases are worlds apart. But the Hillary defenders are trying to say, see, it's equivalent. You know, if you're going to investigate Hillary, you have to investigate Ivanka. We need another special counsel investigating Ivanka Trump. So there's a lot of misinformation. And as a matter of fact, Donald Trump was just on TV, was talking before he heads down to Florida, and said, yeah, it's just more fake news. And in this case, he's right. It is. It's just fake news. They're trying to basically come up with anything to take the heat off of Hillary Clinton. And you and I and the rest of Rivero's Rangers, we need to keep the pressure on there. We can't allow any politician to just keep getting away with this kind of behavior. An example has to be made. And Hillary will do quite nicely. Okay. All right, so we're going to head on into the conflict zones because there are, unfortunately, sadly, so many of them. Over in Syria, once again, the Syrian Arab Army has uncovered a large cache of weapons left behind by the rebel forces in Daraa, consisting of U.S. and Israeli-made weapons. And, alrighty, let's see. I got sound issues apparently. Alright, hopefully that'll fix it. So they found more of these U.S. and Israeli-made weapons in Daraa. Now, overnight, we got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking about the various war zones around the world. We're talking about Syria. And a lot of people have commented on the fact that ever since Syria took delivery of their new S-300 air defense systems, Israel has stopped flying into Syria and blowing stuff up. Of course, this makes Israel look really bad, and it may be the real reason for Avigdor Lieberman's resignation. So last night on social media, there were claims that Israel had carried out airstrikes over West Damascus. See, we are not afraid of the S-300s. We are invincible. Syria is saying, nope, didn't happen. No indications of any airstrikes, no explosions, no bombs, no bullets, no nothing. It's a bluff. It's just another bluff. All right, let's take a phone call here from Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Maybe on a computer game they did the airstrike, but not in the real world.
Yeah.
Walking into a wall, my friends. Don't try it. Mike, I just first thing I want to say is my condolences go out to the families of that sub from Argentina. That is not a way to go to die with that sub imploding. But
well,
you heard about that, right?
Yeah, I saw the photos of it, and judging by the way the propeller shaft was shot out of the sub, it's very reminiscent of the wreck of the Scorpion, where the entire sub just sort of telescopes onto itself, which actually is an almost instantaneous death, as opposed to simply settling on the bottom and having to asphyxiate like happened with the Kursk. First of all, my hat's off to anybody who serves on a submarine. It takes a lot of courage to be in that can. But if you're going to die in a submarine, going by implosion is nearly instantaneous.
And Mike, do you know in Syria that the Russians used the Su-57 in a combat mission? I thought that was talked about a while ago, but now it's come out that they use the Su-57, which is the new stealth fighter. Well, supposedly a stealth fighter,
Yeah.
To a certain extent in a mission. I believe they're just training with, well, not training, but testing it out in Syria because it is like, I guess, a battle/playground to test new weapons. We do the same thing.
Yes.
I guess, but man, like. Mike, the deals that China is making, I want to switch over to China now. Like, they're in the Philippines. They're going to build this new railroad system over there. I mean,
yes.
They're everywhere.
Yeah.
I mean, we're everywhere too, but we're just bombing railroads and bridges, and we're not building anybody's. Mike, there was a time where us, the British Empire, we did those things.
Yeah.
We don't do those things anymore.
No. Well, the United States built the Panama Canal. Who's building the new version? China.
I mean, I hate to say this, but it is over. I mean, they're in the Philippines. They're in Africa. They're in, Singapore. Even Putin was in Singapore. He's making deals. They're opening a cultural center over there. They're doing the Turkey gas pipelines, which we talked about yesterday.
Yes.
I mean, things are happening in the world. And, Mike, I'm going to leave you with one last thing when Trump ran, because you're going to talk about this later. We're in a big, fat, ugly bubble. He should have stuck to his guns, huh? I mean, he should have stuck to what he originally believed when he ran with the wars, with the stock market. Now it's going to be hard for him to reverse that because they'll use that against him as a weapon. They're going to blame him for this stock market correction crash. I don't know yet, but it's been going on for a couple of days now, and it's not good. There's a momentum building on the
there
market.
Definitely is, especially after today. I imagine investors are getting very, very nervous. People are worried about their 401ks. I mean, the stock market's got to be feeling like a baby seal right about now. They just keep taking one clubbing after the next.
And the problem, with Trump, he'll take credit for when it's good. Well, when it goes bad, he'll blame the Federal Reserve. Well, he blamed the Federal Reserve when he ran. He should have stuck to his original beliefs, but something happened when he got in. He flipped on everything.
Yeah.
And I think this is gonna hurt him, the stock market. But all right, Mike, have a good show.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go here. The phone lines are now open, and I don't see Trump being able to win in 2020. I mean, he's got 2 years. He could turn everything around in the next 2 years and go into 2020 with a lot of popular support. But right now, despite claims to the contrary, I don't think Trump's support is that solid. Certainly among the people who worked hard to put him in office back in 2016, he's let us all down. He's let the independent media down. He's basically, he's basically, he let down the people who wanted honest elections. All right, we're going to take another break here for commercials. Then we're going to come on back and talk about the war zones. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And apparently Senator Chuck Schumer is demanding an investigation into acting Attorney General Whitaker's contacts with the White House, which I imagine there's been a few. But this is just more harassment. Clearly, Schumer and his buddies, his cohorts, are afraid to have a real Attorney General in charge of the Department of Justice. Okay. Back on April 4th, 2017, Reuters issued a news story that a chemical weapons watchdog had found sarin was used in an attack on Idlib, Syria. This is back in April 2017. They have only just now issued the correction to the story and say, no sarin, false alarm. All right, let's go to the phones here. We're going to start with Layla in Ontario. Aloha, Layla. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes, it's the talk of whether Trump will be reelected in 2020. I think he's already disqualified himself. He's shown himself to be a liar, a coward, and just completely untrustworthy. I don't know why anybody would even consider him a viable candidate in 2020. We don't know yet what the options are. However, if we're talking about the United States crumbling, then maybe it is time for regions of the U.S. to start thinking about self-governance and releasing themselves from the tyranny of an oversized, overly paid, bloated federal government that is totally unaccountable and is subject to corruption from outside. The only way, I mean, you can always tell what your neighbor is doing, but you can't tell what the guy in the city is doing. When things get too large, they become completely unmanageable by the individual. If individual life or individual thoughts still have any value besides serving some greedy, bloated toad somewhere in the world, then it's time for people to stand up and say, I am not a slave. I am not mute. I am not dumb. And I'm certainly not going to be fooled again by someone who reads a script as though he were still playing a reality show. That's just my opinion. And I think the same applies to Canada. We've allowed ourselves to be fooled. I didn't. I didn't vote for that thing that calls itself a prime minister. But we've lost all our social values. We've lost our individuality. We've lost our rights. And we forfeited them. We abdicated. We resigned our rights by not exercising them. And the longer we go with it, the more we sit in our corner and whine and complain, the more it's going to be irreversible. But the last thing we need is another Trump. I mean, if he failed now, if he had acted immediately as a president, he would have won respect. Chuck Schumer, why should he not try and harass Trump? Trump has shown that there are no consequences. I say, go for it. Bring down Trump. That's before the U.S. crumbles. Bring down the fool that fooled us. So
well,
I think
okay. First of all, let's back up here a little bit. Let's back up here a little bit. Trump is a liar. Show me a politician who isn't. Trump a coward. Show me any politician who isn't. Trump is, unfortunately, he has fit right in with the Washington, D.C. establishment. And you're absolutely correct. This country was not supposed to have a strong central government. It was supposed to be a league of separate sovereign states, and the central government existed only to arbitrate amongst them. But anytime you get a government, it always wants more power and more money and more control. And that's true for every nation or empire on earth throughout history. And it has gone on way too far here. Now, as far as Trump himself is concerned, as I've said before, unless Hillary is the Democratic candidate again in 2020, I'm finding myself having a very hard time whipping up any enthusiasm for supporting Donald Trump, given that he has basically turned his back on the very independent media who helped him win his office. And I think one of the biggest examples of that, of course, is Julian Assange. Because it was WikiLeaks' release of those leaked emails from the DNC servers that really was a hammer blow to the Hillary campaign there just before the general election. I mean, Trump, I hope, will be getting out his pardon pen as soon as the charges are, whatever charges they are, issued against Assange here. And there's a good reason for the Democrats to go along with that. Because again, as I said earlier in the show, it's going to be hard to sell to the American people why it's necessary to charge Julian Assange under Title 18 at the same time we let Hillary Clinton walk free.
Well, it shouldn't even take charges to actually be brought forward. Trump should have spoken up long ago about the decency of someone like Assange and the torture he's been through, being trapped inside the Ecuadorian embassy, constantly having the sword of Damocles hanging over his head. That should not have gone on. But even so, it is time maybe to go back to the beginning. When you lose your path, you hope that you've left enough of a trail that you can find your way back. And we can easily find our way back. The problem is that there is now so many cleavages or fractures within the American populace demographics, it's going to be impossible to find any unity. We've got ethnic groups or, religious groups that have broken up into almost fort-like enclaves. It's going to be very hard to find the homogeneity that once existed and thus a consensus. So Trump has let it go too far, and for that he should be punished.
Well, no, hang on. Let's be fair. The divisiveness in our society was coming from the identity politics on the left, and they profit by the divide and conquer approach, to electioneering and campaigning. So, I still think that people get the government they deserve. When they accepted George Bush Sr. and Baby Bush, and then they accepted 8 years of Obama and actually called him having articulate or eloquent, as having oratorial skills. I mean, he's got the most ridiculous delivery. But anyway, 8 years of Obama really finished it, put the nail on it, and everybody just sat back and let it all happen. And I also refer to what has happened with Israel. While everyone else is being forced to take in migrants, Israel is exempt. Yes.
They can actually round up the Africans, put them in barbed wire prisons, and then get rid of them quietly. Israel is excused, which of course brings us to the question of who's coordinating all of this. Obviously Israel. So the time has come. For 70 years, people like my kind of people talked about the corruption coming out of Israel and how it gained its power. Illegally, illegitimately, but it manipulated. People keep referring to the allies who sanctioned Israel and gave it that land. That is its deed. Well, the allies were illegitimate because they seized power by military might. So the very League of Nations was illegitimate. The creation of the United Nations as an outgrowth of the League of Nations is illegitimate and should have been chased out of the U.S. long ago. Now we were given the Earth Charter when that was introduced by Mikhail Gorbachev and his Canadian buddy, Maurice Strong, who was the puppet of Paul Desmarais and Paul Martin Jr., who, when he had a steamship company, always flew foreign flags so we would not have to pay taxes in Canada. So they're all basically one. I mean, let's not kid ourselves. That boundary between Canada and the U.S. is fraudulent.
Yes.
They're all basically the same ideological group serving one another and using one another. So here we are stuck in a mess. What do we do? We're still toying with the superficial. Are we going to accept Trump as a candidate, depending on who there is no Democratic Party, there is no Republican Party. There's one global ideological power, whoever that is, and it has somehow put Soros up front. Whether or not he is actually the mastermind, I doubt that very much. But still.
Well, he's definitely one of the major players. I mean, if you go back and you look at Soros interviews over the last several years, he's definitely very much on board with these ideas about globalism and no borders and one world government, one world bank. And it's hardly a new idea. People have been talking about this for a long time. Even George Herbert Walker Bush, in his speeches, was talking about the emergence of a new world order. So they've been working on this for a while. Anyway, listen, Layla, gotta let you go.
We've had plenty of warning. We've had plenty of warning. And I will leave it at that.
Okay.
Thank you, Mike. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much here. We got callers waiting on the line. We're going to switch over to Keith Rogers in Montana. Aloha, Keith. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
I just want to mention there, Mike, I noticed that from over in Syria, there's a lot of U.S. naval movement as well as Russian naval movement into the ports over there. So I'm not sure if they're going to do another one of these stupid, dirty stunts like that, because it doesn't seem like the U.S. wants to back off on anything.
Well, they're having to back off. They're trying to look for a way they can get out of Afghanistan without it looking like they're getting kicked out. And they may be looking for an exit strategy from Syria as well as Yemen, because now the focus is on Iran. And I think the United States has finally realized they can't continue to spread themselves this thin across so many different countries at the same time.
Yeah, what gets me about this whole, Mike, though, is that when you have Trump talking about, and I don't care which politician it is, but when you specifically have Trump talk about, either getting out of the World Trade Organization, NAFTA, all the tariffs, the sanctions, dropping from the Human Rights Organization, threatening to arrest ICC judges there. I mean, this is a rogue government, and it's backed by both parties.
Yep. I mean, just looking back at the midterm elections, the government has gone outlaw. Neither party are interested in what the law has to say. They're not enforcing laws. They're just doing what they want to do, what's going to put more money in their pockets.
Well, it's like I've always commented, Mike. You can be pulled over for probable cause because your license plate illuminator is out, and they always escalate that, trying to do some fishing, as well as the cops illegally identifying the passengers of the vehicle without articulating the crime.
Yep.
Meanwhile, we have congressmen and senators that are unlawfully arming drug cartels, paramilitary groups over in the Middle East, Africa, and everything like that. And these guys are eating steak and lobster, and yet we're the criminals.
Yes. Yeah,
so,
well...
Anyway, my best chance there, okay?
It's not so much that we're criminals. We're the part that has to be controlled. And that's really what it's all about. When governments become more tyrannical, they have to exert more control over their population to keep us in our place, to keep us productive, to keep us working and pouring more money into their pockets in the war machine, and rigging the elections to disenfranchise us is part of that process.
Yeah, speaking of that, did you read that email I sent you about I fixed it?
I don't recall if I got that one.
But if you get a chance, it's a summary on the U.S. relations with Cuba, and I put the original post on the left-hand side is what was from the State Department, and then I
oh yes, I did see that. I did see that. Yes.
And it's just like talk about the sheer hypocrisy.
Well,
that
it's
Cuba has
projection.
access to the internet, that they have freedom of speech, all this,
Yeah, it is insane. That they botched Cuba in terms of foreign policy. They botched Cuba. It's now back basically buddy with Russia, and it was kind of interesting this morning to watch President Trump again before he took off for Florida. Was trying to explain why the United States is not going to make a big deal over Khashoggi's death relative to Saudi Arabia, because, hey, they're buying weapons from us, they're selling us oil, they're doing business with us, and that's really much more important. And that, if we make a big stink about Khashoggi's death, well, Saudi Arabia is just going to go buy what they need from Russia and China. And so he's trying to make a very reasonable sounding argument that commerce has to trump human rights, which we know in the real world it always has. But there may be some other developments over there in Saudi Arabia anyway.
Yeah, but on the cusp of that, though, Mike, you have like during Iraq, where the United States deliberately targeted Al Jazeera. We have Israel shooting journalists. I mean, and then of course we have Michael Hastings, then we have Assange. I mean, everything is just pure doublespeak.
Yep.
So anyway, maybe ask you and Claire, okay?
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go and switch over to Mike in Colorado. Aloha, Mike. Welcome to the show. I'm probably going to have to take you through the commercial break. What's on your mind?
Okay, I really like your program. I disagree with you about 60% of the time, but I love your program. I have to say something about that older lady. I'm assuming she's older. With her, you let her go for like, what, I don't know, 3 minutes. I was going to rebuttal her. Can I go through the break, or do you want me to continue?
Well, you've still got about another minute before we have to take the break for the commercial, so you can start now.
Well, look, okay, I lost my TV and my internet a few months ago, so I've been off the air and I haven't been able to listen to you. So I've gotten to NPR and the liberal stuff and other stuff, and the liberal stuff and NPR is not really that bad. They're really not that twisted. The older lady that called, where has she been? And you said exactly, this is nothing new. The older lady that called, and you gave her, I guess, the greatest generation. Where was she in the 30s and 40s and 20s?
Well, she's originally from Palestine.
I'm 55, and I'm 55, and
Mike,
I knew
we got to take a break.
I knew.
Mike, we got to take a break. Hang on. Don't hang up the phone. I'm going to put you on hold. We'll come right back to you. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're talking with Mike in Colorado. The subject under discussion is Layla in Ontario. And Mike, to sort of bring you up to speed, she's originally from Palestine. She lived a lot of years in Israel. She's very well traveled. And the reason I let her go on is because she is very knowledgeable. And I've gotten a lot of emails from people who really like just how much she does know and how much she brings to the show. So you wanted to rebut what she was saying.
Hello. Yeah.
Yes, you're on the air.
The older lady, she's educational and she's, I guess, full of wisdom and all this good stuff, I guess. However, where was she when she was a young girl? She has all this education, and what you said was primo. You said this is nothing new. So you let her ramble with her old age and cough and all this. And
well,
you said,
that was just today only. She normally doesn't have that cough.
No, I've heard her before. However, you just said it. You said there's nothing new. All the information that she gave you, you just said that's nothing new.
No,
anyway,
that is not exactly what I said. You know, she'd come on out saying that Trump was a liar, and all I simply said was, "Aren't they all?" And that it's a systemic issue, and I agree that
that's a big surprise. Wow,
the focus on Trump, the individual, misses the larger picture that the entire government is populated by opportunists, sociopaths, liars, money junkies, whatever you want to call them.
Okay. And of course, that's nothing new. You've been spouting that, or not spouting that negatively. You've been talking about that for, I don't know, 10 years or 5 years? So nothing is, so what you said is what she said, and you responded to her, nothing's new. Okay, so let me say something. Why don't you and Alex Jones and others say, get your monies out of the bank? I hear that nowhere. If everyone with RBN, if you said, pull your money out of the bank, every cent you got, if Alex Jones said, pull your money out of the bank,
Mike,
wouldn't that, don't you think that would work?
Mike, you just told everybody you do not listen to my show, because I'm constantly telling people, because of the problems with the banking system, that you should have no more money in the bank than you need to take care of your immediate obligations, and you should have the rest at home under your own control.
I've listened to you for like 4 years, and I've never heard you say, pull your money out of the bank. I've never heard Alex Jones say, pull your money out of the bank. I've never heard Hagman and Hagman say, pull your money out of the bank. I've never heard John Statmiller say, pull your money out of the bank. If you're forward, you have music and all this stuff. All you got to say is beginning soon. Go to the bank, pull your money out of the bank, pull your cents, your money. I mean, yeah, of course, sometimes people have to use credit cards to pay their bills.
Mike, we have to let you go. We got to do station identification, top of the hour, and we'll be back with hour number 2 after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2, and getting on back to the war zones, tension zones, conflict zones around the world here. Russia is saying they have no desire to get into a new arms race with the United States, although it's very obvious that they have a good military that's built up. But they don't want to get into another race, because that was a big part of what took down the former Soviet Union. Getting suckered into just spending so much on building weapons, the rest of the economy collapsed here. But they are planning on having some kind of a response to the U.S. withdrawal from the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty. And Putin is still out there saying they would prefer going back to treaties that limited these nuclear arms, rather than having to basically start building more and more of these weapons. All righty, let's see. We have a caller. Let's see. Frank in London. Aloha, Frank. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Mike. Just the first thing, just to clarify this about you've never advised anybody to take their money out of the bank. You were the first person I've heard spoken about that, the first person, and you've said it on several occasions on your shows over the years, that you have advised people to take their money out of the bank and only keep what's needed, maybe to pay utility bills and so forth. That's one. So I just wanted to get that clear to the last caller. Mm-hmm. And now I work in around London as a council officer, and I was doing some market supervision, something like that, and I couldn't believe the anger and the betrayal that people felt towards Theresa May with the so-called deal or no deal. It's quite ridiculous, and people are very, very, very angry. People who voted on Brit exit, and it just shows that the blatant disrespect that the government have for democracy. I mean, they have no respect for people, and they have no respect for democracy. We see clearly now that Theresa May was probably a closet Europhile or something. No, it's definitely.
There's nothing closet there. I mean, she was a hardline Remainer right from the beginning, and everybody knew that.
Yeah. So right now, the play. We just don't know what's going to happen now. We just it's going to be an interesting next couple of weeks. That's all I can say.
Well, I think they should have that vote of no confidence. I think they ought to kick Theresa May out, and put Jeremy Corbyn in there. And, at this point, with all the machinations and the obvious skullduggery, I think Britain should just leave the European Union and rely on the World Trade Organization rules to keep things going in terms of trade.
Yeah, I think, from my standpoint, I think opportunity abounds for businesses if they pull out. That's how I think, because I think this, in my opinion, I don't think, this European Union thing has a long life. I don't think it's going to last. I think in the next 5 years, we're going to see a breaking up, or at least a beginning of a breaking up of the European Union.
I'm in agreement. I mean, it was built in. It was built with a built-in self-destruct mechanism called the European Central Bank, and then opening up the borders and just shoving in all the refugees. Yeah, the EU is going to tear itself apart. It's already starting.
Yeah. Okay, Mike. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much for the phone call, and I think the phone lines are open now. I've been having a discussion with Mike in our control room about various and sundry issues. All righty. Now, apparently, Russian prosecutors have announced criminal charges against the U.S.-born Kremlin foe Bill Browder yesterday, days before a Russian police officer could become president of Interpol, in a move that some Russian critics, let's be honest, Russian bashers, are saying might politicize the law enforcement agency. And in point of fact, it was on the corporate media earlier today how the United States is absolutely opposed to a Russian being in charge of Interpol. But apparently the charges against Browder accuse him of forming a group to embezzle funds in Russia, and they're alleging he could be behind the death of his employee, Sergei Magnitsky, in a Russian prison. So, little skullduggery going on there. All right, take another phone call. Jim in Chicago, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Michael. With the market being down, in fact, they said we're at the point now, any kind of gain has been lost for the entire year.
Oh, yeah.
With that going on, the G20 meeting at the end of the month and interest rate going on, do you think the big boys are about to pull the plug on this economy?
I don't think it's a case of them pulling the plug. I don't think they can stop it from sliding. It's coming apart. I mean, they've been doing so much market rigging that there's no underlying value in the markets. And if you go back and you study the history going into 1929, you'll see that there were two phenomena going on. One was that the availability of easy credit got a lot of people investing in the stock market who really shouldn't have been investing in the stock market. In fact, you shouldn't borrow money to invest in anything. If you don't have your own risk capital, stay out of it, or you're going to get slaughtered, which is exactly what happened. So many people were buying into the market, it ran up the price of the stocks, but not their underlying value. So when they had two crashes that year. The first was in August, and it wasn't that bad. And everybody figured, well, that's it. We've had our correction. We don't have to worry anymore. And then, of course, the big one hit in October. The margin calls went on out, and the entire nation was devastated. Now, we're seeing once again that between the availability of easy money and the plunge protection team, the stock market has been driven up in price, but not in value. And a lot of people are over leveraged. Now, mostly it's the big commercial investment houses. I think ordinary Americans are not as into the stock market. I mean, I know we've got all these TV commercials, for E-Trade and trying to get ordinary people to come on in. I don't know how big a sector of the economy that is. But again, it does seem like we're repeating some of the mistakes that were made back in 1929. A big part of the problem is that following 1929, Congress passed a whole bunch of laws to regulate the way Wall Street did its business to try and prevent the kind of volatility that hurts investors. And over the years, one by one, all these laws have been taken down, such as Glass-Steagall. And Wall Street is just allowed to run rampant and do whatever they want, whatever makes, the huge bunch of money in the fastest time possible. Nobody's interested in long-term profits anymore. They want that big score, that Wolf of Wall Street mindset. And pretty much everybody's saying there's going to be a correction of some kind. There has to be. And it may start in the bond market.
Well, Michael, when you mentioned about everyone being or not being in the market, but if you have a 401k, you're in the market. Your pension funds are probably in the market.
True.
And what's worse now than in 1929? Yeah, so many people in debt. But correct me if I'm wrong. Back in 1929, wasn't the government in the black instead of in the red like we are today?
Back in, I think the last time the government was in the black was when Andrew Jackson was president. And what I meant to say was today, people who are trading in the stock market, they're not doing it on margin. Or if they are, they're going to get an ugly wake-up call. But you're right. All of our lives are tangled up in the stock market with the 401ks and the pension plans and the rest of it. And when it lets go, people are going to get hurt. People are already getting hurt if you look at what's going on in the market over the last couple of weeks.
You know, I read yesterday where right now consumer debt is at $13 trillion.
Yes.
Well, no, I think we're going to have a major shakeup pretty soon, probably at the beginning of January or even March.
I would agree. They're going to try and hold everything together and make it look really good for the holiday shopping season. Of course, go on out and buy stuff. The economy is doing really great and everybody's working. But yeah, I think the early part of next year is when we're really going to start seeing it come apart.
And the thing about it, though, I am not a fan of Donald Trump, but you know they're going to blame it on him.
Of course they are. Of course they are. They're going to look at those tax cuts and they're going to say, that's what did it. That's absolutely what did it.
Yeah. Well, Michael, you take care.
All right. Thanks very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go. We're going to do a shout out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. Now, the United States has announced they are preparing to list Venezuela as a state sponsor of terror. And this is being reported by the Washington Compost, citing U.S. officials and internal government emails. Now, it isn't that anybody has caught Venezuelan terrorists running around our country, but being put on that list of state sponsors of terrors gives the president additional authorities to basically poke at them. And we have been hearing for months now talk about a direct military intervention in Venezuela to get Venezuela under U.S. control. Okay. We have Layla in Ontario on the phone, and normally we have a 1 call per caller per day rule, but in this case we're going to waive it because she wants to respond to Mike in Colorado. And I don't want to get into the situation where Mike and Layla are going to be flailing back and forth on my radio show. But Layla, what's on your mind?
Yeah, I'd like to object to his implication that the older lady he's implying that there's a degree of senility. And where was I, he said, in the 1930s? I wasn't born yet. I think he is a Zionist shill, just like that Neil from California that called once. And when I said something about how I missed the patriarchy that was philanthropic, and then he said, well, I love my wife. I don't dominate her or abuse her. I have never said that. And this constant reference to me as a Palestinian. I was born there from families that had been there for 30,000 years, according to my DNA. I came as a child of two, as a British subject, because it was during the Mandate. I wasn't even a refugee. So I came to Canada as a British subject. So I have lived in this country and traveled widely because of my background. And when it comes to being intellectually competent, I'll match my IQ at my age against his anytime. So that's it. I'm just tired of these Zionist shills or these so-called liberals trying to discredit me with old, unacceptable tropes that demean a woman and use every possible kind of insulting cliche. So, goodbye.
Well, goodbye, and well done, well said here. And if it'll make you feel any better, I actually got a lot of email about Mike in Colorado, all of it negative. So, anyway, thanks a lot for the phone call, Layla. We're going to let you go.
You have a lot of really intelligent, astute listeners.
Yes, I do.
And that's why I do call in, and that's why I follow your show, because of the kind of audience you have. And then when we get a paid shill like this calling in, he needs to be discouraged because he needs to be rebutted. So thank you, Mike, for allowing me this opportunity.
All right. Well, you're welcome, and thank you again for the phone call. We'll talk to you again real soon. And getting on back to the war zones here, the Islamic Republic of Iran's Medical Council is saying that the illegal economic sanctions imposed by the United States against Tehran have been having negative impacts on the country's health sector, saying there needs to be an immediate and humanitarian solution to the issue because Iran is unable to get access to medical supplies and various health services. So basically, they're thinking there should be an exemption, and they're applying to United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres to say there needs to be something done here. And I don't know what the UN will do, if anything, but it seems perfectly reasonable to me to have a medical exemption to the sanctions. Now, this is a very alarming story. This is out of the Independent in Great Britain. The Trump administration hawks are putting the U.S. on a course for war with Iran. And we have been hearing them talk about war with Iran for years now. Everybody knows that Israel wants the U.S. to go to war on Iran, to break it up, to balkanize it the way they did Iraq, who prior to the war in Iraq was Israel's other regional political rival. And so now the U.S. has obediently smashed up Iraq, and now Israel is saying, go get Iran. And it looks like that may be about to happen. And as I mentioned earlier in the show, that may be the reason why the U.S. is very slowly and with as much grace and dignity as possible starting to pull out of their engagements in places like Afghanistan, and Libya, and now Yemen. They're talking peace down in Yemen. Because war with Iran is not going to be easy. It will not be easy at all. And, of course, it runs the risk of war with Russia. Russia's not going to sit there and let the United States grab off another huge chunk of land getting closer and closer to the Russian borders. Now, apparently, a few days ago, the Saudi justice system cleared the crown prince of any involvement in Jamal Khashoggi's murder, basically claiming the CIA's evidence, if they have any, is flawed. Saudi Arabia's King Salman is, of course, praising the kingdom's justice system for this. And Trump, as I mentioned earlier in the show, he's not taking any punitive measures against the Saudis over Khashoggi. And it is blatant hypocrisy because of all the sanctions that were leveled against Russia over the mere accusation without proof that Russia was behind the poisoning of Sergei Skripal and his daughter Yulia, who still have not been heard from in quite some time. And Trump at least is being very honest about it, because in his press conference this morning he was saying it's really a matter of business. If we stop doing business with Saudi Arabia, they'll buy what they need from Russia and China. So commerce trumps the dead body here. Is Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman off the hook? Well, maybe, maybe not. Because apparently quite a few of the princes in the family are turning against him. And remember, a few weeks ago, King Salman's younger brother, Prince Ahmed, returned to the kingdom from self-imposed exile weeks ago. And so apparently, according to Reuters, some members of Saudi Arabia's ruling family are agitating to prevent Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman from becoming king. So the U.S. may do nothing about it, but it looks like there's going to be an internal palace coup. Or if the U.S. is involved with it, it's going to be very, very covert. I think Mohammed basically proved himself to be less controllable than was desired. And he certainly did make a botch up of the war in Yemen. So we'll see what's going to happen with that here. Story coming out of the Daily Mail. Saudi royals have begun plotting against the Crown Prince and aim to stop him taking the throne when King Salman dies. Now, they're saying this is in the outcry over Jamal Khashoggi's murder. I don't think so. It's a power play, plain and simple. Crown princes get brought down. Kings get brought down. I think we're about to see it happen again. Okay, we're going to take a break now for some commercials, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, and I got yet another email about Mike in Colorado reminding me that it is, in fact, against the law to promote a voluntary bank run, which I had recalled in the past, but again, all the mail about this, Mike, it's all negative. It's all very negative. Okay, so getting on back to the conflict zones here. Apparently, it's not just Saudi Arabia who's tired of the war in Yemen. Apparently, the Saudis' coalition are all backing away. They've spent a huge amount of money. They've caused a lot of damage. It doesn't look good. The optics are bad. And that may be why Saudi Arabia is now saying, let's talk peace. Maybe the Houthis just wore them down, just like the Vietnamese did to the United States. So there is a ceasefire in effect in Yemen for the first time since the start of the war. And hopefully the United Nations and other humanitarian agencies are going to get in there and start taking care of some of those people, start taking care of the cholera epidemic. Meanwhile, here in the United States of America, this is one of the reasons why we shouldn't have bills that say for other purposes. Republican leaders on Capitol Hill moved yet again to block a vote to wind down U.S. military support for the war in Yemen, this time by tucking it into a rule governing legislation that removes gray wolves from the endangered species list. This is how messed up the system is. One has got nothing to do with the other. And they stick it in this bill, and they figure that, oh, the Democrat, oh, yeah, it's going to get on through. Because the reality is, when those bills get to the floor, I mean, they're huge with all the additions and inclusions. I mean, do you remember the size of the Affordable Care Act? How big that was? These members of Congress aren't reading that stuff. Their staffers are supposed to read it and prepare précis, but they can't get through it all. Remember when Nancy Pelosi was talking about, you know, we have to pass it before we can see what's in it? It's a joke. That's why so much bad law gets passed in this country. Over in Israel, at least 25 Palestinians, including a journalist, were injured by Israeli live fire during the Freedom Flotilla protests at the northern border of the Gaza Strip yesterday. And the protests were held in support of the launch of a flotilla titled Freedom Ship 16 that set sail from the port of Gaza in an attempt to break the Israeli siege on the enclave. So instead of starting outside and sailing in, this one started inside, trying to sail on out. Where did they get the boats? Well, these other Freedom Flotillas that have gone on in there have made a point of donating the boats that they use to the Gaza fishermen. And eventually Israel turns them over and they've got it. So the Israeli forces live fire wounded 25 people, including Associated Press cameraman Rashid, who were all transported to local hospitals for medical treatment. And Rashed was filming hundreds of Palestinians who were protesting on a beach by the border fence near Beit Lahia. So about 30 fishing boats joined the flotilla, which was organized by Gaza's National Committee for Breaking the Siege. Now, for some reason, Israel has started banning the exit of processed foods from Gaza. And there's now a ban where Gaza cannot send processed foods to markets in the West Bank or Israel. And this, of course, is causing serious economic harm to Gaza. And I'm waiting for somebody in Israel's government to stand up and say, well, look, if you're going to do this with BDS, then we're just going to do the same thing with Gaza. But again, it's just another form of oppression. Meanwhile, over at Airbnb, they have made the decision to remove all properties situated in illegal Israeli settlements. And they did that a day before Human Rights Watch was due to release this report into the company's complicity in the dispossession of Palestinians. So they sort of beat them to the punch, as it were. Now, Human Rights Watch issued a 65-page report, Bed and Breakfast on Stolen Land, Tourist Rental Listings in West Bank Settlements. And it just created this ugly, ugly picture of Airbnb's policy, accusing it and other platforms such as Booking.com of supporting Israel's illegal settlement policy. But Airbnb has now said, we're not going to do that anymore, which is a good thing. Okay. All right, looking at the clock here. Over at the United Nations Security Council, the UN Special Coordinator for the Middle East Peace Process, Nikolay Mladenov, said he remains very concerned by Israel's persistent use of live fire against protesters. As well, he should be. All right, we're going to take another break for commercials, and we will be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And I'm going to go off on a tangent because the story just came in now, which I think is worth mentioning. Apparently, Sarah Sanders has now released the new rules for the White House reporters, and she made a point of saying they created these rules with a degree of regret. And given the position taken by CNN, the White House felt obligated to replace previously shared practices with explicit rules. And the rules are, there's only 4 of them. 1, a journalist called upon to ask a question will ask a single question and then will yield the floor to other journalists. 2, at the discretion of the president or other White House official taking questions, a follow-up question or questions may be permitted, and where a follow-up has been allowed and asked, the questioner will then yield the floor. Rule number 3, yielding the floor includes, when applicable, physically surrendering the microphone to White House staff for use by the next questioner. Rule number 4, failure to abide by any of the rules 1 through 3 may result in suspension or revocation of the journalist's hard pass. So very appropriate. Don't know why they didn't have it all along. And clearly it is aimed at Acosta's rude confrontational behavior. Okay, getting on back to what's going on over in Israel. Story coming on out from mondoweiss.net about how Israel is almost starting to overplay screaming anti-Semite at any supporters of Palestinian rights. You know, that if you think Palestinians are human beings and they deserve human rights, oh, you're an anti-Semite. Apparently, in order to be a lover of Israel, you have to hate the Palestinians. I mean, that's basically the message that's going on out. Over in Great Britain, the Quakers Church has become the first church in Great Britain to announce it will not invest any of its centrally held funds in companies profiting from the Israeli occupation of Palestine. And in a press release, the faith group said the trustees of the church took the decision in light of its long tradition of ethical investment, which the Quakers do have. The church said they refused to profit from the occupation of Palestine, pointing to its historical divestment from apartheid South Africa, the fossil fuel industry, arms companies, and even the transatlantic slave trade. They have been around for a while. Over at the University of Michigan, they've got into a little bit of a controversy regarding BDS. And it all comes down to this associate professor, John Cheney Lippold, who was asked by a student to write a letter of recommendation because the student wanted to go study in Israel. And John Cheney Lippold said, I'll write you a letter of recommendation to anywhere on earth except Israel. And the administration came on down. His annual merit-based pay raise was frozen for 1 year and sabbatical suspended for 2 years because of his decision not to write the recommendation letter. Now, the fact of the matter is he's gotten a huge amount of support among the students for taking a stand on this issue. And very clearly, the tide is beginning to turn despite all the money that Israel is spending to propagandize college campuses. It's not working, or even worse, it may be backfiring. The students may be smart enough to realize when they're dealing with these paid Israeli propaganda shills. But it looks to me like support for Israel is really starting to fade on the universities and even in America in general. Even among American Jews, they're starting to pull back and say, no, this makes us all look bad here. And, okay. All right. Now, the United States and Australia are developing or redeveloping a joint naval base in Papua New Guinea to counter China's influence in the region. You can see the double standard and the hypocrisy there. If China builds bases on China's islands, ooh, bad China, they're being aggressive. If the United States and Australia put a naval base in Papua New Guinea, which neither one of them own, I would like to point out, it's just there to counter China's aggressions in the region. Okay, let's talk about the economy because the numbers are not good. And once again, as we saw back in 2008, the credit default swaps are rearing their ugly head, and credit spreads are blowing out, and the credit default swap market is going for junk debt. And the exposure from all these credit default swaps globally is more money than the planet is worth. Now, for those who don't know what a credit default swap is, it's like an insurance policy. If you buy a house, you can buy fire insurance on it. If you invest some money in a company, you can buy a credit default swap as a form of insurance to reduce your losses. If the company goes out of business and your original investment is gone, the credit default swap returns at least part of that investment to you. And they're very popular on Wall Street, but they're unregulated. For one thing, you can buy a credit default swap on somebody else's investment. Can't buy fire insurance on your neighbor's home, but you can buy a credit default swap on somebody else's investment without limit. And whereas regular insurance companies are required to keep cash reserves on hand to deal with a expected number of claims coming on in, the banks that were selling credit default swaps, the financial institutions, didn't. That's what happened back in 2008 when the mortgage-backed security fraud collapsed and all those credit default swaps came due. There went Lehman Brothers. So that it's looking like, once again, we're getting into that situation. China has now sealed a currency swap deal with Indonesia to use their own currencies bilaterally, ditching the U.S. dollar. I think it's another sign of China's displeasure with the United States, along with dumping U.S. treasuries. Iran and Iraq are looking at doing trade in their local currencies and dropping the U.S. dollar. It's starting to accelerate, this de-dollarization. Now, Ray Dalio, in an interview with Barry Ritholtz for the Masters in Business podcast, basically said that if the dollar were to lose its reserve status, the dollar will lose 30% of its value. And that would cause quite a bit of chaos. Personally, I think it might be worse than that. But it's going to happen. The more the United States tries to throw their economic weight around the world and use the dollar as a political instrument of control, the more the world is turning away from it. Now, as you know, it was a bad day on the stock market today. The Dow was down 600 at one point. It pulled itself up. I think it closed around 530 down. But I imagine a lot of investors are getting very, very nervous here. And amazingly enough, it was the tech stocks that were leading the downturn. Facebook is looking at their third straight month in the red. And they're looking at more and more problems. I mean, the social media giant stock fell nearly 5% on Monday alone. That's the lowest level since February 2017. And this was after that New York Times article about how top management hired a PR firm to smear critics of Facebook. So they're on a losing streak. And they're not the only ones. Google stock is down. Netflix, Apple, Amazon. They've seen their stock prices plummet by about 20%. Facebook has had a fall of 39% below its year high. That's pretty bad stuff here. And Netflix has had a 35% drop. They're blaming it on the competition coming in from Disney and Apple, which are rumored to be starting their own TV streaming services. Amazon blamed a widespread sell-off in tech stock for their poor performance. But all of the so-called FANG stocks, which stands for Facebook, Amazon, Netflix, and Google, they're now in bear market. Facebook investors have lost 39% of their paper wealth. The combined market value of the FANG companies has dropped by $610 billion. Now, as far as Google and Facebook are concerned, yeah, good. That'll teach you to start abusing your customers with all the censorship nonsense. For those of you still playing around with Bitcoin, it went below 4,500 today, which is well below what used to be considered its floor value of 6,000. Okay, now French bank Societe Generale has agreed to pay $1.3 billion to resolve criminal and civil charges in the United States and France for bribing Gaddafi-era Libyan officials and manipulating the LIBOR interest rate benchmark. Remember back when we were talking about how LIBOR was being rigged? This is one of the banks that did it. So apparently they're going to pay $717 million to the U.S. Department of Justice, $420 million to New York's Department of Financial Services, $163 million to the Manhattan District Attorney's Office, $81 million to the U.S. Federal Reserve, $54 million to the U.S. Treasury. So you can see how the mechanism works. The banks cheat the customers out of money, and they get caught. The government sues them, and the money that started with the customers winds up in the government's hands. Now, a couple of weeks ago, I think it was, a few weeks ago, there was an interesting story where Venezuela wanted their gold repatriated. They're trying to rebuild their economy, and they wanted a solid foundation to put it on. And The Bank of England said, no, we're not going to do that. We're concerned of the high corruption in the Maduro government, that they may be engaged in money laundering, or they're going to use the gold to buy drugs. Just all kinds of excuses. Well, nobody was really being fooled that all of a sudden the Bank of England is the world's policeman for money laundering. So over at the Gold Antitrust Action Committee, their chairman, Bill Murphy, was on Gold Seek Radio with Chris Walczak, basically saying what I had suggested at the time. The Bank of England doesn't have the gold to send back. There may be a physical shortage out there. And this may well be a global problem. Now, again, we covered this on America's Book of Secrets on the History Channel, where there does seem to be a lot of empty space in these bullion storage vaults. And there's talk about rehypothecation, which is a fancy name for where we're going to keep the gold on the books and pretend it's still here, but we're going to send it out the back and we're going to lease it out for other people to play around with and make money. And they'll bring it back eventually. And then, unfortunately, they're not able to do that. Or some of it just got melted down and coined up to power the market for physical gold that's been out there for a while. And as I mentioned yesterday, there has not been a full audit of the gold in Fort Knox for 50 years. Now, if it turns out that this gold is missing in all of these places, that's going to cause a tremendous amount of chaos in the financial markets for anything that is dependent on that gold for its value. So we'll see. Now, over in the European Union, they're looking at setting up this special purpose vehicle for Iran, so that Iran can go on doing business despite the sanctions. And down in Cuba, one of their senior officials is saying, you know, that's looking like a real good idea, that Cuba could benefit from a similar mechanism to basically get out from this, 60-year now U.S. embargo? So Cuba's watching what's going on very, very carefully. And if it works for Iran, Cuba's saying, yeah, we need something like that here. And I keep saying it, the more the U.S. tries to sanction and tariff everybody, the more the world is reorganizing the global economy without the United States here. The U.S. is talking tough again. They're promising to disrupt oil shipments to Syria. They're going to put sanctions on Russian and Iranian companies. And the U.S. is throwing sanctions once again against what it describes as a network of petroleum shipments to Syria, including Russian and Iranian companies and individuals. Washington says it wants to disrupt shipments to Syrian-owned ports. And 6 individuals have been sanctioned over these oil shipments to Syria. Now, here's an interesting question. Why is the United States once again sanctioning Syria for the oil? It's just trying to keep the tensions going over there. It really is. To me, it's a signal that the United States has not abandoned the idea of getting Bashar al-Assad out of power. All right. Some numbers for you to think about here as we head into this next commercial break. The national debt in 2018 is $21.6 trillion. By the year 2040, it will be $100 trillion, and none of that is including the unfunded mandates. It's out of control here. We're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're talking about the economic news as we come up here on the top of the hour. Target shares tumbled 9% as their earnings have missed their forecasts. Target is also saying that they're having to pay higher costs, which is hardly confined to Target, I'm sure. So let's look at some companies that are letting people go. Apparently, Haagen-Dazs is going to be letting 1,000 people go from their ice cream manufacturing facilities. General Motors is now offering voluntary buyouts to 18,000 salaried employees. If there are not enough volunteers, there will be layoffs. Broadcom is going to lay off almost 2,000 workers. Wells Fargo has told the public it anticipates eliminating approximately 1,000 positions. Starbucks is going to be laying off hundreds of workers, mostly from the company headquarters in Seattle. Nationwide Insurance is going to be reducing the size of their national workforce by about 1,100 workers. Boston Scientific is planning $150 million in annual cuts, and that will include layoffs. Blue Apron is eliminating about 100 more jobs as it desperately tries to stay afloat. Cisco laid off approximately 460 workers earlier this month in their bid to cut costs. Blue Cross Blue Shield is laying off 250 workers in South Carolina as it shifts its resources around. The economy is tightening up. There's no question about that. We were talking about this the other day, and Victoria's Secret is in trouble. And the CEO of L Brands, which owns Victoria's Secret, the CEO of that division, Jan Singer, resigned last Wednesday because of the slowdown in sales and what's being claimed as a lack of diversity in the line's iconic annual fashion show. Now, this basically came on the heels of responding to pressure to have plus-size models and transsexuals added to the runway. And Victoria's Secret basically said that's not our image. And focus groups show that people are going to be turned off by that more than turned on by the rest of the models. So it's a business decision. But the other part of it is their products are very expensive. And again, the economy is tightening up, and I think probably people are going to go back to realizing that nudity is very inexpensive. Save a lot of money that way here. Okay, Russia and Turkey have officially completed construction of the offshore portion of the Turkish Stream natural gas pipeline, which will be delivering natural gas early next year. And over in Great Britain, they're going to have to raise the age for pensions up again because of their deteriorating economy. People are going to have to work into their 70s. All right, we're going to take a break here for station identification, and we will be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3 here. And let's talk about immigration. And the top story in that, and I'm just scratching my head about this one. A federal judge in California, had to be California, has issued a temporary restraining order against the Trump administration's new asylum rules. That happened earlier today. Now, back on November 9th, Trump issued an order denying asylum for all foreign nationals who enter the country illegally. You set foot over that border, your application for asylum is null and void. Now, the ACLU challenged that proclamation in court, arguing it violates the Immigration and Nationality Act and the Administrative Procedure Act. And U.S. District Court Judge John Tigar agreed, explaining that Congress extended asylum eligibility to all comers. Okay, we need to go back to Title 8. It says right in there, the president, purely by proclamation, can say, don't let these people in. Is there nobody in Trump's administration who's actually read the U.S. code on this? So the TRO is going to remain in effect until December 19th. Basically, they just opened the gates again. We're going to be flooded with this migrant horde. Trump has failed to do what he said he was going to do. And yes, he's got the courts working against him. He's got the ACLU working against him. But when this whole migrant horde business started up, I said this was going to be a watershed for Trump. That if he did not succeed in stopping this migrant horde from getting into our country, it was going to be the end of his ambitions for 2020. Surprisingly, the people of Mexico are proving to be much more effective against the migrant caravan. And down there, they're even making a party out of it. The Tijuana first, and they're protesting the illegal invasion of the migrant caravan. Tijuana's mayor was spotted in public wearing a Make Tijuana Great Again hat, obviously modeled after Donald Trump. And there have been some scuffles, but mostly it's just a big, big protest saying the migrants need to go back to Central America. The Mexicans don't want them any more than the Republicans do. Certainly the Democrats want them all. The Democrats want anybody they can get to vote for them. But apparently ABC and NBC were down there taking video and basically ignoring the fact that the people of Mexico are not happy about this. Maybe they're concerned that the Central Americans are cutting in on their action. You know, if anybody's going to sneak into the United States, it's going to be us Mexicans. The rest of you get out of here. But it is a mess. And there are already 3,000 of these migrants in Tijuana who want asylum in the United States of America. Now, the feds have halted the San Diego port of entry. As the migrant caravan nears, drivers are stuck for hours. It's a huge, huge mess. Now, you've probably seen this footage on TV showing the migrants just crawling over the fence. Well, it turns out that's old footage. Maybe it was just in a library or an archive someplace. But the reality is apparently that whole section of fence is now covered with razor wire. So we'll see what's going to happen there. But yeah, this is nasty. The White House is likely to grant U.S. troops on the border with Mexico additional authority to protect Customs and Border personnel if needed. This was announced yesterday, and there was an official speaking on the condition of anonymity, said a public announcement could come around, well, today. Specific details were still being worked on. I think that's a very smart thing to do, given the violence that we have already seen with these migrant hordes. I mean, it's going to be worse than, Black Friday at the local Walmart when they get to that gate, get to that fence here. Over in Great Britain, the UK Labour Party leader Jeremy Corbyn is urging business leaders to reject Theresa May's botched, worst of all worlds deal on Brexit, and he's calling for a general election. So Corbyn closed the annual Confederation of British Industry conference in London yesterday, and the CBI represents 190,000 British businesses that employ a combined staff of 7 million. So this is a power block. So Corbyn basically said that Theresa May's draft Brexit deal is a blindfold Brexit. It will leave the country in an indefinite halfway house without a real say over our future, and Labour will vote down the deal in Parliament. And said that a general election is now the only sensible course of action. Now, I was hearing that they had enough of these letters they needed to force a vote of no confidence. But I'm not hearing any more about that. We're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. Over in Germany, there's, again, a big stink going on about sending Syrian refugees back to Syria now that the war is pretty much over. And of course, the open borders people are saying, "Oh no! If they go back, they'll be killed by Assad. They'll be persecuted. They'll be so forth." But apparently, this German journalist went on out and he saw this 28-page classified document, which basically said there is in no part of Syria is there comprehensive long-term and reliable protection for persecuted people. But the journalist came on back and said, basically, the Syrian refugees they have there now, they're ordinary criminals. And that's been another big problem with all of this refugee nonsense all over Europe. Now, George Soros and his open borders people are trying to play with our heartstrings and say, "Oh, they're fleeing the war, they're fleeing the genocide." No, they're economic migrants. They want to go where the money is and have a really good job. And again, a lot of them are criminals fleeing prosecution, and a lot of them are carrying contagious diseases. So. Alrighty, getting back to the California fires, they're still trying to figure out how many people are still missing, let alone dead here. And the fires are still burning, but they are getting close to containment. They're figuring that the camp fire will be put out toward the end of this month, in another week or so. And now everybody's pointing fingers. What really happened? Of course, Governor Moonbeam is out there saying, "Well, it's human-caused global warming." Obviously it was global warming. It turns out that there have been several bad environmental decisions that were made that basically created this climate for these fires. And Trump is absolutely right. Governor Brown's insistence on protecting the forests instead of managing them and clearing them out is what created this perfect fuel source. Now remember, back in 2016, Governor Brown vetoed a bipartisan bill that mitigated wildfire risks from power lines and utility equipment. And PG&E has admitted that they had 2 power line incidents in the days leading up to the start of that camp fire. Okay, over in Washington State, they have Police Department Chief Lauren Culp, and he wants to create a sanctuary city for firearms. Going to put back the liberals' mechanism on them. Oh, it's a sanctuary city. We don't like the law. We're going to have a sanctuary for it. So Washington recently approved Initiative 1639. It prevents individuals under the age of 21 from buying semi-automatic weapons. The law also creates the potential for someone to be criminally prosecuted if he or she stores a gun where a prohibited person can gain access to it. Now, this Police Chief Lauren Culp announced Sunday he cannot and will not enforce the law, and that Initiative 1639 almost eliminates the ability for individuals under the age of 21 to exercise their constitutional rights. He says it goes against my oath of office, and he was even being interviewed on Fox and Friends. So basically, he's trying to get his city, where his department is, to pass the Second Amendment Sanctuary City Ordinance, which would prevent federal and state infringement on the right to keep and bear arms. Now, back when Clara and I lived in Washington State, it was a lot like growing up in New England. Everybody had a gun, and the gun laws were pretty loosey-goosey. People didn't even pay attention to them. I saw guns being bought and sold at yard sales without any paperwork here. Now, here's an interesting story, and it's a good reason why we all should have our Second Amendment guaranteed arms here. More and more towns are declaring that it's illegal to feed the homeless or to help them out. And apparently down in one part of Dallas, Texas, where this is in effect, this group that does feed the homeless, hand out clothing and so forth, have started carrying their AR-15s. And it worked. Nobody bothered them. They were able to hand out all the food, all the clothing, all of this stuff. Nobody bothered with them. Now, over at Kansas City, as you know, they got into a real bad PR disaster when the health department of Kansas City basically went into this operation where volunteers were cooking food for their homeless in Kansas City, and the health department poured bleach all over this freshly prepared food and threw it in the trash bin. And their excuse was they couldn't guarantee that this food was safe for human consumption. They wanted to protect the homeless and hungry from listeria and salmonella and all the rest of it. And of course, it makes absolutely no sense. These people are going to be a lot safer and healthier eating this freshly prepared food than digging around in the trash dumpster, you know, grabbing onto all that romaine lettuce that's just been thrown away. Well, the Kansas City Department of Health has promised they're not going to do this ever again. They're not going to pour bleach on food meant for homeless people. Unfortunately, they have not promised not to destroy food again. And I think the real agenda here, again, is, you know, go to the store and buy your food. Go on down to that safe, inspected, healthy supermarket there and buy yourself a bunch of romaine lettuce. All right, we're going to take a phone call from Frank in North Carolina. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, Mike, what's on my mind is I'm not really too familiar with this group. I've heard of them probably over the past year once or twice. They're a civic national group, which is distinguishable, I guess, from a white nationalist group. They don't, distinguish or among, about race or anything like that. But I had received a message this morning from someone who may know more about them than I do. But they apparently on Drudge this morning, they reported that the FBI had declared this group a terrorist organization. And, it's just amazing. I haven't heard anything like this with the Antifa, which I'm a lot more familiar with Antifa.
Yeah.
And I think maybe the Proud Boys have gotten into it, physical altercations publicly with the Antifa. But I don't know. I think this is something. I was wondering if you had an opinion on it.
Well, I'm concerned that this may be more fake news that is getting shoved on out there before before we really check it on out here, because apparently the document making the claim that the FBI has classified them as a terrorist group, actually an extremist group with ties to white nationalism, is coming out of Washington State law enforcement. And why isn't this coming out of the FBI itself? But it looks to me like somebody is trying to demonize any white people who get together to form a support group to counter some of these other groups that are getting together to scream about us evil white heterosexual males.
Yeah, as far as I know, this isn't even a white group or a so-called white group. They have other races in their group as well. But anyway, I just thought it was interesting, but maybe it hasn't been totally vetted yet.
Yeah, I mean, Gavin McInnes on his radio show was saying he can't find any attribution to the story.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thanks an awful lot here. All right, getting back to education and political correctness, and you're going to love this next one. It is a doozy. Apparently, over in Great Britain, university lecturers are being told not to use capital letters because they frighten the students. And staff at Trinity School of Journalism have been told to write in a helpful, warm tone. avoiding officious language and negative instructions. And critics are saying it's more academic mollycoddling of the snowflake generation. But apparently there's this list of do's and don'ts, with do and don't being words that are now frowned upon. I think we found where Dolores Umbridge went after she left Hogwarts. Anyway. Oh, you're going to love this next one here. Okay. Grandmother Dasha Fincher was arrested by police and thrown in jail for months. She didn't do anything wrong. Police couldn't tell the difference between cotton candy and meth. Now, she's finally out and she's starting to sue like crazy. But apparently, these two police officers, Deputy Cody Maples and Deputy Kevin Williams, asked what she was carrying in the bag, and she said it was cotton candy, and they did not believe her. So they basically took a sample of the powder. Apparently it was cotton candy before it had gone through the cotton candy machine. So they ran this little field test with a lab kit that gave a positive for meth. Now the problem is these kits are known to produce false positives repeatedly. And yet the police departments continue to buy them and use them. And maybe that will stop because the grandmother is now suing everybody involved. And again, it's just insane what's going on out there. Over at Twitter, in an interview in the New York Times, the co-founder of Twitter, Evan Williams, literally apologized because Twitter helped play a role in electing Donald Trump to the White House. He was out there saying it's a bad thing, Twitter's role in that. If it's true that he wouldn't be president if it weren't for Twitter, I'm sorry. It's getting a little bit out there. Now, the president has credited Twitter with his election. I wish he'd give more credit to the independent media. We worked really, really hard to counter the corporate media, and I don't understand why Trump has turned his back on Julian Assange. Anyway, we got to take another break for commercials. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And Facebook is now in even more trouble. Apparently, down in South Sudan, somebody posted an ad on Facebook to auction off a child bride. And basically, it was a 17-year-old girl who ultimately was sold for 500 cows, 3 cars, and $10,000 in cash. And yeah, it's another black eye for Facebook. All right, CDC is apparently starting to up the ante regarding this polio-like disease. They're still describing it as polio-like. Trust us, it's not really polio. They've come up with this acute flaccid myelitis is what they're describing it as, or they're calling it. But when this first showed up, doctors were saying, it's polio. Polio's coming back. And the CDC said, no, this is something different. Trust us on this. But apparently, more cases are emerging. And the CDC is scrambling to identify the cause. And if it does turn out to be a problem with the polio vaccine, they're going to be struggling to bury it again, find another scapegoat. You know, it's the Zika mosquitoes. That's what's doing it. So it's a real shame here. All right, here's an article. This came out of John Rappaport. He writes a lot of really good stuff. And it's addressed to science bloggers living with mommy. And it's aimed basically at people who will see what's in the corporate media and think that's the real world. And it really isn't. Back in 2015, Richard Horton, who was the editor-in-chief of The Lancet, which is a highly respected medical journal, basically said the case against science is straightforward. Much of the scientific literature, perhaps half, may simply be untrue. Afflicted by studies with small sample sizes, tiny effects, invalid exploratory analysis, and flagrant conflicts of interest, together with an obsession for pursuing fashionable trends of dubious importance, science has taken a turn toward darkness. The apparent endemicity of bad research behavior is alarming. In their quest for telling a compelling story, scientists too often sculpt data to fit their preferred theory of the world, or they retrofit hypotheses to fit their data. Journal editors deserve their fair share of criticism too. We aid and abet the worst behaviors. Our acquiescence to the impact factor fuels an unhealthy competition to win a place in a select few journals. Our love of significance pollutes the literature with many of a statistical fairy tale. Journals are not the only miscreants. Universities are in a perpetual struggle for money and talent, to which I would also add media attention. Now, there's a lot more examples that are given here, but the basis of it is that much of what we are being told is science, like what this polio-like illness is driven by economics, politics, bad data, ambition. Anyway, we're going to grab a phone call from Brian in Kentucky. Aloha, Brian. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, how's it going, Mike?
Going fine.
Good, good. Hey, I wanted to talk to you about the Whitaker guy, the acting attorney general.
Yeah.
And, and how the Dems are kicking up about him being appointed the interim attorney general.
Oh, yeah, they want him out.
Back when Bill Clinton first became president, he fired every single district attorney, federal district attorney
US
in the United States.
He fired all the U.S. attorneys.
That's right. Back in when he first became president, and nobody's saying anything about that. It's funny how there's one set of rules for the Democrats, and there's a second set of rules for Republicans, or independents even. I mean, right down the middle. We just, I feel like we just being raped, and we're like the silent person that don't get to say anything, about the whole situation. So I just would like to know what they're going to do when hopefully Trump. I'm not so sure it's going to happen. I'm keeping my fingers crossed, but I'm hoping there's some indictments coming around the corner after Whitaker is approved as the attorney general. I'm not so sure about the odds of that one happening, though.
There's going to be a fight for it. I mean, first of all, Trump hasn't indicated that he wants Whitaker to stay on as the permanent attorney general. He's still making up that list. But it's very obvious the deep state is absolutely terrified of Whitaker. They want him out of there. Anyway, listen, Brian, we're going to let you go. Thanks an awful lot for the phone call, and we'll be back after these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And getting on back to this article, basically pointing out that much of what is presented as scientific literature isn't. And it's basically a collection of quotes from people who are well respected. For example, Marcia Angel, who was the former editor of the New England Journal of Medicine, wrote once in the New York Review of Books in 2009, "It is simply no longer possible to believe much of the clinical research that is published or to rely on the judgment of trusted physicians or authoritative medical guidelines. I take no pleasure in this conclusion, which I reached slowly and reluctantly over my 2 decades as an editor of the New England Journal of Medicine." Then we have, 2005, John P. Ioannidis, Department of Hygiene and Epidemiology, University of, School of Medicine. Oh, this is in Greece. basically saying there is increasing concern that most current published research findings in all scientific fields are false. A research finding is less likely to be true when the studies conducted in a field are smaller, when effect sizes are smaller, when there is greater financial and other interest and prejudice, and when more teams are involved in a scientific field in chase of statistical significance. Simulations show that for most study designs and settings, it is more likely for a research claim to be false than true. Moreover, for many current scientific fields, claimed research findings may often be simply accurate measures of the prevailing bias. There is increasing concern that in modern research, false findings may be the majority or even the vast majority of published research claims. Okay, going back to Richard Horton, editor of The Lancet, and it's a repeat of the quote that we had before. But basically what's going on here is that we know the corporate media lies to us all the time. And we know the government is lying to us all the time. We know certainly that up until recently, the church has been lying to us about child sexual exploitation. And there's kind of the link there, because in medieval times, even Renaissance times, people would look at a priest in their robes and say, oh, this person is incorruptible. I will believe what they tell me to believe. But over time, people have moved away from religion. And people understand that clergymen are not, in fact, scientists. And as the world has become more scientific and technological, those who are in power have been corrupting the sciences and the scientists. Scientists are the new priesthood. They don't have a religious robe. They have a white lab coat. They're not holding a Bible. They're holding a clipboard. And they will proceed to tell you things. And you have been raised in the school system to basically presume that if it's scientific, it must be so. But just calling it scientific does not make it so. For one thing, what these editors of these journals was saying was accurate. The system is distorted by financial pressures, by other outside interests. And the desire for media fame, that's a lot of what powered the human-caused global warming scam. If you would hop on board with Al Gore, you were going to get your face on TV, you were going to get funding. Life was going to be good. Speaking of which, apparently 6 inches of snow nearly paralyzed the New York area, and it got really bad. Drivers were trapped on gridlocked, snowy roads for hours. Middle schoolers in New Jersey had to spend the night at the school. The upper level of the George Washington Bridge, one of the busiest bridges in the world, came to a standstill with drivers being forced to abandon their cars. So this was an early winter storm, apparently unexpected, and they weren't prepared for it. There's all kinds of recriminations and second guessing about what went wrong. And Mayor Bill de Blasio said the city was caught off guard by the ferocity of the storm. And part of the problem was early forecasts predicted it would be a light dusting at best. So at Central Park, there were 6.4 inches of snow at 5 a.m. Friday, the biggest one-day November snowfall in 136 years. More confirmation, it's going to be an early, hard winter. And another reminder that all of these weather forecasting people, they're not very good. They're not very good. I mean, I'll look at the Weather Channel app here in Hawaii, and it's maybe good for a few hours into the future, but it'll say, oh, we're going to have thunder showers this evening. They never show up. Or it's going to be clear tonight, and then we get the rain. I think part of the problem with the Weather Channel app is they've tied it up with Watson. which is IBM's artificial intelligence system. And I've raised this issue before. How do you know that what an AI is learning is correct? There's no AI teacher looking over the AI's shoulder and saying, you know, you get a B or a B plus on the work you just did. And there have been some experiments with AIs where they just go wacky. Anyway, getting on back to human-caused global warming. Apparently, geologists have discovered that they can track Earth's climate from the geological history. And apparently, they are seeing there is a 400-year cycle in the sun. And it, too, is hitting a low point. This is going to be a grand solar minimum, and it's going to be a rough one. It will affect crop production, the economy, and everyone on the planet. And it's going to last from basically now until, according to the geologist, David Devine, 2023. So, despite the massive fires that just hit California, wildfires overall are at a global low point. So, climate's what we expect and weather is what we get. Okay. Right now, you see the gun grabbers screaming about guns. Guns are killing people. Guns are killing people. Well, so are doctors. In fact, right now, statistics from the National Institutes of Health are showing that more than 72,000 people died from drug overdoses during 2017. We're talking prescribed, supposedly medically supervised drugs. 49,000 of those people were said to have died as a result of opioid abuse. Ever since the U.S. went into Afghanistan, the opium has just been pouring into this country, both legitimately and street. And the opioid pain reliever is one of Big Pharma's most profitable cash cows. They're actually incentivizing doctors to write the prescriptions. In fact, we had a story, I think it was about a year ago, where two executives at a pharmaceutical company were actually charged for bribing doctors to write prescriptions for opioid painkillers to get the patients addicted and hooked. It's hard to see a moral difference between these pharma executives and the street dealer down on the corner. But so in 2017, 49,000 people died of legitimate prescribed opioid abuse. In the same period of time, there were 15,000 fatal shootings, 17,000 homicides overall, and almost 45,000 suicides. We were talking about that yesterday, how the suicide rate has been going up. So basically, in the short version, Big Pharma's dangerous drugs are actually killing more people than guns or automobile accidents. So you think about that one for a while. Okay, we're going to take a phone call. Dustin from New Jersey. Welcome back to the show. I needed a call right now. What's on your mind?
Mike, I've been listening, I've been calling in since, God bless his soul, John from Barbados. Because we love John from Barbados. And that caller from Colorado, Mike, saying like, when are you going to, say to pull the money, pull the money out of the bank. Mike's never said that. You say just make sure you have enough money to pay your bills, and that's it. The rest of your money should not be in the bank. It should be in your pocket or in gold and silver, because that is protection from what's coming. And that gentleman, NPR, you're listening to NPR? Come on now, man. National Public Radio, go to the library or go to Barnes & Nobles and pick up the Great Reformation by David Stockman, The Corruption of Capitalism. I mean, there's a lot of books out there that is telling you what's coming.
Yes.
The future is the past. You know what I mean, Mike?
Yep.
And you have people calling in just about when the indictments come. People, the indictments are not coming. There's no help coming. You are the help. Mike is the help.
Yep.
You know, by getting information. You know what I mean? Information's out there. Not listening to NPR or MSNBC, CNN, or Fox News. You guys got to do your own research. And sure, it might take a little while because it's a lot easier listening to somebody from NPR, I guess. But I mean, that dude was totally wrong. I mean, if you keep your money in the bank, you're a fool. Just pay your bills with the money in the bank.
Yeah, pay your bills with the money, and you're not going to get that much of a return on your savings account right now. In fact, if you have your money in a savings account at the bank and you take into account the rate of inflation, you're actually losing purchasing power. And if you're not going to gain purchasing power, again, wouldn't it be safer to have it under your control at home? Because we have seen laws that are being passed. If the banks get into trouble again, and they will when the crash comes, they are now legally allowed to basically grab your money, because bank customers have been redefined from being bank customers to being unsecured investors in the bank. And that basically means that, the banks can lose your money. There's no protection for that.
Creditor, Mike.
Huh?
Unsecured creditor is different than regular creditor. If you're a secured creditor, you get the money first, which is the most important group of people. You'll get yours last if it's pennies on the dollar.
If it's even that. If it's even that.
Yeah.
And
oh, sorry.
I was going to say the banks are even allowed to go into your safety deposit box for any items of value to keep themselves afloat. It's going to happen. And it would be the first time. Don't forget Roosevelt's gold grab. So
Venezuela's.
or Venezuela's. And again, calling for a mass run on the bank is illegal. It's a criminal act here. And I think this Mike in Colorado, if he doesn't know that it's a crime, he needs to, because he can get into trouble calling for that.
Because, I've been listening to you for a while, and you said, the money you pay your bills with, the rest put in a mayonnaise jar and put it in behind your house on the pineapple plant. You always say that.
Yep.
So you never called for a bank run.
Nope.
You never said that. So I don't know what he was talking about. All right, Mike, have a good rest of the show.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over to Brian in Arkansas. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind? I'm sorry, I'm in Alaska. Brian, are you there? I do not hear Brian. Okay. Don't suppose a polar bear got him. All right, well, we'll wait and see if Brian comes on back here. And again, looking through the headlines here, over at Toys R Us, as you know, they shut down. They closed down. The Toys R Us workers finally got their final severance pay, $660 each. And again, another iconic company. Another iconic company just gone. We're heading into the holiday shopping season, and there are a number of other iconic retailers who are hanging by a thread. And I would imagine come January, we're going to say goodbye to a few other household names. Over at Sears, I think I mentioned this before, their unsecured creditors are trying to get the bankruptcy court to order an immediate liquidation before Sears runs out of all of its money. They want settlement now. So there's no question that this economy is in serious trouble. And anybody who's telling you it's great, whether it's the corporate media or the government itself, they're fibbing. They're fibbing to you. We're in serious trouble. And unfortunately, historically, there is a link between hard economic times in this country and getting involved in a global war. Because they've done it twice before. Crash of, I think it was 1907, World War I. Crash of 1929, World War II. Crash of 2008, And here we are. And I honestly think we're going to lose this one. All righty. So, we already talked about the child bride. Apparently, out in California, we were talking about how Jerry Brown had vetoed that bill calling for additional safety measures on power stations to basically make them safer and less likely to cause a wildfire. And apparently, according to the Washington Free Beacon, now there are some people in California who are kicking up a fuss about that and saying maybe Governor Brown ought to be convinced to step down over that. So we'll see what's going to happen there. President Trump submitted answers to Mueller's questions. We already did that one. We're going to take a break for commercials, and we'll be back with the last segment of our program after these few words. And aloha America, welcome back to our show here, last segment of our program today here. Now, as you know, yesterday morning there was a tragic shooting at Mercy Hospital in Chicago, and it was getting all kinds of coverage all day long, and the media kept saying, white male shooter, white male shooter. It was almost like a tape recorder, white male shooter. Then all of a sudden, did you notice how the story went away? I mean, you can still find it at various news websites, but certainly not on the TV news here, because the shooter's name was Juan Lopez, which means he wasn't white, and of course that would have a negative impact on this open border agenda. So it just all kind of faded away, and they're saying that even though he shot himself, he was actually himself killed by a police bullet. Not that I really think it makes that much of a difference here. Tom Fitton is out there with a new videotape from Judicial Watch, and he's saying it is just outrageous that the Department of Justice and the State Department continue to protect Hillary Clinton. Well, Tom, I share your outrage, but what you don't understand is the Department of Justice and the State Department are protecting themselves. All of the people who are around Hillary Clinton protecting her, they're not doing it because they like Hillary Clinton. Probably most of them just hate her and wish she would disappear in a puff of smoke. But look at all the corruption that has surrounded the Clintons. You don't think people in Washington, D.C. have been dipping into that? That they didn't have a hand in that Clinton Foundation? That they weren't part and parcel of all of that CIA drug running? Or the selling of secrets to other countries? They're all dirty. And that's why they're protecting each other. Remember when we pointed out how James Comey and Loretta Lynch both had ties going back to HSBC when it was caught laundering drug money. So, Tom, it's not just Hillary Clinton. There's a lot behind there. And it does need to be dug on out because it's just going to grow. You know, corruption's like a cancer. The more it eats, the more it wants to eat, the more it feeds, until it strangles the rest of the nation. Corruption had a lot to do with the bringing down of ancient Rome, had a lot to do with the bringing down of the Soviet Union, had a lot to do with the fall of the French kings. That's why our founding fathers, when they set up this country, they tried to set up a system that would limit how quickly corruption could take hold. And they did a pretty good job of it when you consider how long it's taken for things to get this out of control. But that's what they wanted. And even Thomas Jefferson himself wrote that he didn't expect the government he'd invented to last more than 100 years. That it would become so corrupt it would have to be brought down and replaced with something new. Okay, there's the music. Time for me to get on out of here and get some stuff done with the rest of the day. Please stay tuned for John Stenmiller. I'm sure he's got lots of interesting information to share with you. And please donate to RBN. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America. Oh, yes, and the lovely Lady Claire will be in hour number 3 since we are going to be on best of shows Thursday and Friday. We'll be right back tomorrow. Aloha, America.